want to welcome everyone to SQL Friday. This is number 36, I think. Yeah, SQL Friday number 36. And our star today is Manish Kumar, who is correct me if I'm wrong, you're an architect from Microsoft, right? And
That's right.
Manish is going to talk about securing our data on Azure SQL Database. I'm really glad to have you on. Welcome, Manish.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. So, sorry, I'm slightly late because of the confusion, although I joined this meeting like 10 minutes before. But unfortunately, anyways, let's not spend any more time on it. So I'll quickly kick off and I'll shorten my introduction and everything so to save time. Right, guys. So good morning, everyone. My name is Manish Kumar, and I'm Senior Cloud Solution Architect at Microsoft. Come from data platform side, data and AI kind of. And I've been working with SQL Server and Azure SQL Database for more than 2 decades now. And I'm really excited to be here today to share my experience with you all. So you may want to take a note of my LinkedIn account now, so that if you want, you can later send me a connection request referring today's session, and I'll be glad to connect with you all. I will also request you to keep your questions for the last, as I'm looking to complete everything in 45 minutes or so, and leave 15 minutes for question and answers. Right. So I've already created a demo environment today. And it's going to have Azure SQL DB, Azure SQL Server, which is a logical server, storage account, Azure Key Vault, and Azure Virtual Network. So I hope you guys are familiar with Azure Portal, and you can create these resources in Azure Portal. But if there are few who wants to see how to create them, I can quickly spend 5 minutes to create it right now. So just unmute yourself and just tell me if you want to see it. Otherwise, I'll go with the pre-created demo environment. Anyone who wants to see how to create these environments, do unmute himself and let me know. If not, I'll just carry on. That's fine. Looks like everyone knows this. So let's move forward. And as you know, securing your data in cloud is extremely important. And I'm looking forward to talk you through the security design options today to safeguard and monitor your sensitive data stored in Azure SQL DB. So that you get alerted on every single anomalous activity against your database. In today's session, we'll be covering the basics of securing the data tier of an application using Azure SQL Database. As you can see in the slide, the security strategy which is recommended is a layered defense in depth approach. This is what Microsoft suggests you to do. And it moves, and these layers move from outside to inside. Now, due to the time limitation, I'll give an overview of the outer 2 layers, but my focus would be more on the inner 2 layers, threat protection and security, and information protection and encryption. So let's start with the outermost layer first. The outermost layer is the network security layer, wherein the data residing inside your Azure SQL database is protected by configuring firewalls. So these firewalls will prevent any network access to the database server until an access has been granted. Okay, now you can configure firewalls in 2 ways. First is based on IP addresses of the origin, and the second one would be to allow Azure Virtual Network traffic to access your Azure SQL DB. Okay, the IP firewall rules grant access to the database based on the originating IP address of your client. while the virtual network enables Azure SQL Database to accept only those connections which is coming from a selected subnet inside your virtual network. So in summary, we would configure firewall in the outermost security layer to allow only the legitimate traffic to come in. Now configuring firewall is pretty simple using Azure portal, and let me quickly show you where you can configure it. So I'll just go to my portal. You guys can see my portal?
Yes, we see the portal.
Okay. So this is the resource group which I've created, SQL Friday, and I've created a SQL database, a SQL server, a key vault, a virtual network, and a storage account. Now, while creating Azure SQL Database, if you have created it before, you'll know that you have to create a SQL server, which is nothing but a logical server, basically. Okay, and your SQL database sits within that logical SQL server. Now, to switch on few of the security features, I have switched on SQL Defender at the beginning while I was creating Azure SQL Database, and that created a storage account as well, right? So let's get into the SQL Server, logical server first, where I'm going to show you how you can quickly create a firewall rule. And on the left pane, you can see there is a security options. Let me click on the firewall and virtual network. This is where the two options which I just discussed with you can be configured. The first one is you can put a rule name, you can put the start IP address and end IP addresses, and you can just save that. So all those clients having those IP addresses will be able to access your Azure SQL database. But the better way of doing that is put your clients into a VNet, virtual network, and connect Azure SQL DB through that VNet. So any subnets which have been configured to connect to your Azure SQL DB within that VNet will be able to access your database. Now, how you can do that, and that is a better way of doing it. So you can just simply go and add an existing virtual network, or you can create a virtual network. I've already created for the demo. It's pretty simple. So I'll select the subscription, whatever it is. I've created a SQL Friday virtual network, which I'll add it. You can put the subnets, whatever it is for you. I'll leave it default for now and enable it. Once this gets enabled, click on OK, done. Once this gets updated, it's currently updating the VNet rules, your virtual network will appear over here. And that means the subnets which you have added will be able to access your Azure SQL DB. Right, so you can see it has appeared over here, and that is done. So this is how you can configure your firewall rules. Now the next layer is access management layer, where we can configure authentication and authorization to access data which is sat within your Azure SQL DB. That means, first of all, you have allowed a set of clients to access your database. So any user which is using that client should be able to access your database. Now, the other thing is whether that user is the legitimate user or someone is using a wrong client. Right, so that is where your second layer comes in, and that is where you have to configure authentication and authorization things. Right, as you know, authentication is the process of proving the user is who they claim to be. Now, Azure SQL Database supports two types of authentication: SQL authentication and Azure Active Directory authentication, AAD. Normally, you'll call it as AAD. Now, SQL authentication refers to the authentication of a user who connects to your Azure SQL database using a username and password. Although SQL authentication is supported in Azure SQL DB, but as a best practice, I would recommend you to use AAD authentication. Azure Active Directory authentication is a way of connecting your Azure SQL database by using identities which is stored in your Azure SQL DB. It comes with lot of advantages. If I just name few of them, you can centrally manage all those identities and permissions. You can also have a centrally password rotation policy put on it and all those things. Okay, now what is authorization then? So a person has authenticated himself that he is the right person and he has got rights to access this database. Now, what is authorization in that case? Now, authorization refers to the permissions you assign to a user within an Azure SQL database and determines what the user is allowed to do. Now, the user can connect the database. That doesn't mean that every single user has got rights to access everything which is stored in that database. Now, database can store many sensitive informations and all those things. So there could be some financial data, there could be some PII data and all those things. That doesn't mean every single user has got rights to access that. And that is where your authorization comes in. So the best practice I would say would be to create custom roles whenever it is needed and add users to those roles and give them the least privileges required to do their job based on what their role is in your organization, right? So please ensure that you do not assign permissions directly to the users. One more thing which I'll recommend here is to implement row level security. Now, probably you all know what is row level security, but that allows you to control access to the number of rows a user with the specific privileges should be able to see. Right. As I said in the beginning, due to time, we will talk more on the inner two layers, as I would like to show you how you can implement almost all of them using Azure Portal. So let's start with the third layer, and the third layer is threat protection and security management. Now this right. So the threat protection and security management consists of like four things. First is auditing, second is data discovery and classification, which comes built in. Vulnerability assessment and advanced threat protection is something which you need to switch it on by accepting SQL Defender, Security Defender kind of thing, and these two vulnerability assessment and advanced threat protection needs to be switched on, which I already did this morning when I created this demo environment like 30 minutes back. So everything is up and running, I believe, and hope demo god supports me today. So let's see what is auditing first. Now, auditing, as you know, if you have SQL background or any database background, you know what auditing does and what it can bring to you. So a SQL database auditing will track your database activities, and it will help you to maintain compliance with security standards by recording all the database events to an audit log, whatever you have configured for. Now, this audit log should then be analyzed. So it's not only recording, you should be analyzing these audit logs and investigate it for historical activities to identify if something, a potential threat has happened or some abuse has been going on with your data, or is there any security violations or something like that. So I'll quickly show you how you can configure Azure SQL DB auditing using Portal. So let me go back to Portal, and right there on the very next is auditing. So switching auditing on is again very simple. It is currently off by default, so I'll switch it on. Now you can see there are three options. So all those audit logs or the events which goes into audit logs can go to three destinations. One is storage. So I've already created a storage account. I'll just configure it now for the audit logs to go and get stored in the storage account. I'll show you how to do that. The other option is log analytics. If you want to use log analytics to analyze your audit logs, then you'll have to configure it. You'll have to create a log workplace, and your audit log actually starts flowing to log analytics, where log analytics can analyze your audit logs and give you meaningful results out there. If you are using any third-party tool to analyze your audit logs, then you have to send it to Event Hub. So what happens in this case? Your audit event starts flowing to Event Hub, and your third-party tool will connect to Event Hub and start getting the data from there. And then whatever your third-party tool does, however it analyzes, however it gives you a meaningful insight, it will do that. Now for today's demonstration, I'll just configure a storage account. So my subscription is selected. I'll go and select a storage account which got created when I created Azure SQL DB today. So I've selected that. Now this 0 says that it will retain your audit logs forever, which I would not like it to do. So I'll just give a 7 days retention period, but it will all depend upon your company's policy, and I'll go and save it. Once this updates your auditing setting, that is all done. Your auditing is up and ready. Any such activities will move to audit log, and audit log gets stored for 7 days in your storage account. Right. Let's get back to the next slide. And the next slide is data discovery and classification. So let's talk about that, what exactly it is and what capabilities it brings to you. So as you know, in today's digital world, it is extremely important to protect your data from malicious user. Now, you have got you have created all those layers where a user can access that data. You have given all those rights, but it becomes very difficult to understand if a user is trying to abuse your data. Who has got the rights, but he's trying to abuse your data. And that is where your data discovery and classification comes in. And it will give you a view of all those users who have been accessing the sensitive data from your database. Now, when I keep on saying sensitive data, what exactly it means? The sensitive data can be characterized as PII data, a financial data, a healthcare data, or any data which is sensitive for your organization. So this data discovery and classification is a built-in feature which comes with Azure SQL Database by default. You don't have to switch it on or switch it off. It is already there. You just have to configure your classify your sensitive data over here, and it can empower you to discover, classify, protect your sensitive data in Azure SQL DB. So let's quickly go and see how this can benefit you and how you can classify your data. So in this case, I was working with SQL Server. Now let's get into Azure SQL Database. So whatever configuration you do on SQL Server, which is a logical server, that configuration is inherited to all those databases. Now, that is where I put that auditing on, and that is where I put that firewall on. Now I'm going to configure my individual databases. And that is why I've come to Azure SQL DB. If you again see, there is a security pane over here on the left, and that has a data discovery and classification one. So this data discovery and classification, if you see, there are two tabs coming up over here. One is overview, other one is classification. Both are empty, both are blank. If you want to classify any of those columns which are sensitive for your organization, you can click on add classification. It allows you to select the schema. It allows you to select the table. Let's select a product model table. So select a column over here. Maybe name column, and information type is name, sensitivity level is.
Sorry, Manish.
Yeah.
Are you sharing? I'm still seeing your resource group page, SQL Friday.
Is it? Is everyone seeing?
I'm seeing it, so I think it's a lag on the client side. So it's
okay. Sorry. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. So you are able to see the data discovery and classification page, isn't it?
I see it, yes.
Okay, that's fine. Fine, I'll probably slightly go slow, but you know.
I can see it now, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks a lot. So you can see that there is an overview and a classification tab. I'm currently on the classification tab and I'm trying to add a classification here. And I'll put a highly confidential GDPR and add a classification. So any of those columns can be classified like this. I'm not going to use it from here because I want to show it to you. Another thing, Azure SQL DB actually scans through your database, and based on the naming convention of your columns, it comes out with a list of recommendation showing that Azure SQL DB thinks that these columns are sensitive and they should get classified. So this is where you can see all those columns. Now, this is the sample database for today's demo. It just have few tables and few columns, but it has come up with a recommendation of 15 columns. So it says that these 15 columns are sensitive columns and you should classify these columns. Okay, so let me just select two of them because when I'll do an ATP, I'll tell you why I just selected two of them. For now, let's just select two of them and accept selected recommendation and save it. So what happens now? You have classified two columns from customer table, which sits within sales LT schema, and the columns are first name and the last name. Both the columns are confidential as per GDPR. Now, if I go to overview tab, you can see that two columns are classified now, and one table, which is the customer table, is participating in it. Fine. So I've classified two columns. Now what happens? Let me go to SSMS. So I'm going to run a query which says that select first name, last name from sales lt.customer table. So I'll quickly run this query. I have logged in to SSMS as a SQL admin account. So while I was creating Azure SQL DB, an admin account needs to be created, which is a SQL principle, and I've connected as a admin account. So I've just run this query, which actually goes and selects first name and last name from customer table. Now I've classified these two columns, and these two columns are sensitive. So anyone who is accessing this data should be logged by the auditing, and this is how we can verify. So you have to go to auditing and you have to keep an eye on the audit logs, what is going on and which user is doing what. So you can see the date and time. It is today's just now, and someone has tried to run a confidential GDPR information by running a statement called first name last name from sales LT table. And it also gives you a client IP, the client which was used to access this data, the principal name. As I said, I'm SQL admin. If you try to do it, it will be your user ID which will be shown over here. The database it has tried to access, the server name it has tried to access, and all the information you'll get it over here. So this is what your data discovery and classification gives it to you. Okay. You classify the columns, and after that, anyone who is trying to access that data, whether legitimately or trying to abuse your data, you'll be able to see that. Right, so that is what your data discovery and classification does for you. The next one is vulnerability assessment, and so vulnerability assessment is nothing but it is a set of rules which is based on Microsoft's best practices. And it actually goes and scans through your database, and it compares between the best practices which Microsoft has defined and how you have configured your database. And wherever it finds any differences or configurations which does not follow best practices, it comes as a failed configuration or the failed result. Okay, so vulnerability assessment is implemented as the steps you can see on this slide. So you first run a scan, and then the scan service scans your database for any potential vulnerabilities. Now, when your scan is finished, your scan report is automatically displayed in the Azure portal. You can then review your results and drill down to each failed result to understand the impact of the finding and why each security check failed. Now, you can also take an action, you can do a remediation from there itself. There is always a remediation plan given over there. Or if you think that that the failed check is absolutely okay for you, you understand the risk, you accept the risk, and that's not a risk for you as your organization is okay with that. So what you can do is you can add it to your baseline. So you can create a baseline of your organization, which might be different than what Microsoft best practices say. That's absolutely fine. You know what you are doing better than us for your organization. And you can add it to your baseline so that when the next scan runs, it doesn't show it as a failed result. So your aim should be whenever the scan runs, there should be no failing results coming up. It should all the pass ones. Either you take an action on it, remediate it, or add it to the baseline if it is okay for you to, and if you accept that risk. Right, so I'll quickly show you how you can see it by going into the portal. In portal, slightly things have changed in last few months, because these two, vulnerability assessment and ATP, now comes under security center. It used to be a different advanced data security. It used to come under advanced data security a few months back. So slightly there would be some change. If you guys already know this, then probably they will see some changes over here. You have to click on the security center, and at the very bottom you can see vulnerability assessment findings. So when I created the database today, it ran a assessment for me. And let's go and see what it has come up with. So it shows that 5 of the total checks have failed and 29 of those have passed. You can see all those passed ones over here. You can click on them and drill down to see, but more important ones are the failure ones. I would recommend that you go in each one of them, remediate that, solve it, and if you accept the risk, then add it to the baseline. Now, one of those, which I'll be taking an example today, is sensitive data column should be classified. Remember, we actually classified only 2 of the columns, while 15 were shown in the list, which Azure SQL DB has come up with. Now, if you think that all 15 columns should be classified so that any malicious user trying to access it and you'll be able to see it, then click here and it takes you to data classification, discovery and classification, select all of them, accept selected recommendation and save it. Right, that is how the next time when it runs, it doesn't fail and you are protected as per us. But if you think that, okay, all the 15 columns, I don't think all 15 columns are sensitive enough for my organization. It is absolutely okay to just keep first name, last name. Then this is where you can go and approve it as a baseline. Select yes, it has been running, successfully set your baseline. And next time, whenever you run this, the scan will pass this particular one. Right, so I've rerun the scan, and once the result comes back, I'm expecting to see only 4 failing checks and 30 pass checks. Now, by default, this checks runs every Sunday 12 noon. If you don't want it to be a recurring check, recurring scan, then you can go and switch it off. And by default, it sends the result of scan to the administrators and the subscription owners. But if you want it to be sent to some other users, there is a facility to add more email addresses. I'll show you from where you can do that. See, there are only 4 checks now, failing checks, 30 is passed. Right. Ideally, I would have actually gone and classified all those 15 columns, but just for the sake of demo, I added it into a baseline, but it all depends upon your organization's need. Right, how will you configure that? So this is where you can go and configure it. You can see Azure Defender for SQL, vulnerability assessment, and advanced threat protection. So we just saw vulnerability assessment, and next one would be advanced threat protection. As I said, periodic recurring scans are switched on. You can switch it off if you don't want and you want it to manually run the scans every time. But if you want it to be run every single week, you can switch it on. Click this and an email notification with the scan results goes to admin and subscription users. This is where you can add additional email addresses if you want. Same thing, you can configure email addresses to advanced threat protection as well. And if I click this, what advanced threat protection notifications you are going to get, these are the ones you can check, uncheck based upon your need. But I would again suggest that keep everything switched on. If a SQL injection happens, a data exfiltration happens, and any unsafe action has been taken up, any brute force login or something is going on, you'll get a notification. Any anomalous client login has happened, you'll get a notification. So these are all the default ones. The best practice is to leave it as it is, but I'm just showing you from where you can do that. Right. Sorry, I'm just rushing because we have lost 5 minutes anyways, and I want to give you 10 to 15 minutes at the end so that you can have your questions done. So let's go back to advanced threat protection. Right. So advanced threat protection detects suspicious database activities, any potential vulnerabilities, any SQL injections, any anomalous database access and query patterns, and it will alert you through email, and also you can see alerts on the Azure portal. I won't be able to show you on the email because I can't open my email at the moment. But I'll show you it on the portal. So on the left, you can see the list of suspicious activities when ATP will alert you. And the rightmost screenshot is the mail you should expect to receive. The screenshot in the middle is the screenshot from the Azure portal. Now, let's quickly go through the alerts which gets configured with ATP. Vulnerability to SQL injection. Now, this is what you are going to receive when this may indicate that is a possible vulnerability to SQL injection attack has happened, or a potential SQL injection has happened. You'll get an alert saying that someone has accessed your, or someone is trying to access your database from an unusual location which was not happened before, or someone is trying to access your database from an unusual data center. No one has tried to access from a different data center. That could be a legitimate one. A new application would have come up which has been hosted in another data center. So those alerts you'll get. Now it is on you to take any remediation action, or you just have to, you are okay with that and you just suppress such alerts in future. Right. So today I'm trying to do a potential SQL injection, and let's see if that works or not. So I'll go back to my SSMS. I'm trying to run this SQL injection query, which Azure or Microsoft takes it as a SQL injection, potential SQL injection attack. So I've run that. And let's go to portal and see if it has come up, anything has come up over here. I can't see anything has been coming up at the moment, and I can see something has come up. Yes. So you can see a potential SQL injection has happened, detected by Microsoft. This is active at the moment. This is active. Activity time you can see, and the severity is high. So you should be taking some action on that. Right. I can't see here. Let me refresh it. Right, it has come up now. So you can see that this is the potential SQL injection. This is an active state. You can get more details from here. What has happened? Who has tried to do this? So it says that web app, some web app has been accessing it. This is something which I have put it in my SSMS while configuring. This is the database name, SQL Friday DB. This is the IP address. There's a SQL admin principal who has tried to run this query, which looks like a potential SQL injection. This also gives you, if I don't want to disclose this because it tells me about where I am located and which resources I am using. So if you click each one of them, it gives a lot more details. And it also tells you if you want to take an action, if you want to know what is SQL injection, actually, you can click this and read it through it. If you want to generate an automatic response whenever such an SQL injection attack comes, You can go and configure a logic apps, which will trigger automatically and does what you want it to be done. But if you feel that these attacks are okay and you're doing it on a demo environment, you're doing some penetration testing kind of thing on all those things, probably you can go and create a suppression rule and it suppresses. You won't get a notification based on what you have created as a rule. Right. So this is how your advanced threat protection helps you. Now, so the most we have seen the third layer now, and the innermost layer is information protection and encryption. This is where we'll be talking about dynamic data masking and encryption. Right. So dynamic data masking is basically a policy-based security feature that masks your data, sensitive data on the fly. Now, on the fly is very important. Please remember that nothing happens to your database data. Your data remains as is, intact. The data can be seen by any of those administrators as is. Only the users with less privileges will see a masked data which gets masked on the fly before they can see the data, whether they run a query on SSMS or they are looking from a client application, wherever they'll see a masked data. But be mindful that any server administrators, any database administrators, any security manager roles, they will be able to see the data unmasked because data is stored unmasked. Nothing happens to the data itself. A masking happens on the fly. Right. So let's jump into the demo and go back to my database. On the security side, again, you can see there is a dynamic data masking, which I'm talking about. And again, Azure SQL DB comes up with a number of recommendations where you can see there are few columns with Azure SQL DB things that should be masked. Okay. If you don't find a column which needs to be masked here, then you can always go and click on Add Mask, select your schema, select the table, select the column, select your masking rule, and just add it over here. It's that simple. For today's demo, I'll just use one of the columns which appears over here. So I'll just add mask to the email address column, which is present in customer table under the schema sales LT. So I'll go and add a mask and save it. So once that gets saved, okay, now you can see that mask, whenever you add it from here, it gets with a default value. Let me change it to an email value and then again save it back. So I'll change it to email, and I would expect non-privileged users to see email address as axxx@xxxx.com. Okay, I'll just update it. Once this is done, I'll save it. Right? Let me go back to my SSMS and try to access the email address from the customer table. And you can see I'm able to see all those unmasked email addresses. The reason is I have logged in as a sysadmin. Okay, and as I've said, administrators would be able to see it unmasked always. So let me create a test user and grant a permission to see the data which sits within customer table. So I've created a user. Now run same query as a test user. And you can see that all the data which is present in email address for this test user who doesn't have enough privileges is masked and he is not able to see the data. Okay, I can grant, if you think that this test user needs to be given unmasked permission, it is very simple, grant unmasked to test user and again run it, and this test user will be able to see the data. Right. Now, if you see there is a box over here which hasn't got refreshed, so let me go and refresh it. And if you can see that test user appears over here. So this box tells you that all the users, apart from the administrators who have got the rights to see unmasked data, But all the other users who are not administrators but have been given an unmasked rise appears over here. So if your administrator or someone has given unmasked permission to a sensitive data to any users can be audited from here. You'll see a list of all those users. Right. Let's talk about encryption now. So it is encryption is different than masking. And masking, nothing happens to your data. Encryption, your data is actually encrypted. Okay, so Azure SQL DB supports encryption in transit, encryption at rest, and encryption in use. Okay, encryption in transit is implemented using transport layer security (TLS), and Azure SQL DB supports TLS, and it encrypts all the data which is in motion between the database server and the client server. Okay, as a best practice, we would recommend that in your application's connection string, you specify an encrypted connection and never trust the server certificate. Now, what will this do? This will force your application to verify the server certificate and thus prevent application from being vulnerable to man-in-the-middle type of attacks. Okay, it is better to obtain the connection string from the Azure portal as it comes with the correct settings for you. Okay, the next one is encryption at rest. Now, encryption at rest is implemented using transparent data encryption, TDE. TDE adds a layer of security to help protect your data at rest from any unauthorized access to your raw database files or your backups and all those things. Now, TDE encrypts your entire database using an AES algorithm, encryption algorithm, and it doesn't require any application level change. Your developer doesn't have to do anything for that. In all newly created Azure SQL DB, if you go now and create an Azure SQL DB, that comes up with an encrypted TD enabled by default. Okay, I'll quickly show you how you can check it. I'm saying that by default TD remains enabled, but I'll show you from where you can check it that it's enabled or not. And then TDA by default is encrypted using service managed keys. Now, when I say service managed key, that means your key is being managed by Azure, Microsoft or Azure, and you can trust it because no engineer or anyone has got access to that. It has been managed by the service itself. But I've seen many financial customers who would like to bring their own key, who would like to manage their own key. They want to create their own key, rotate their own key, expire their keys. So in short, they want to manage their own key, and that is what I'm going to show you today. From where you can see whether TD is enabled or not, and from where you can see if you want to manage your own keys, how you can do that. So we'll be using Azure Key Vault here to store the key. I'll generate a new key in Azure Key Vault, and I'll show you how to do that. Getting back to my portal, this is where you can see whether the TD is enabled or not. I'm currently under Azure SQL Database. In Azure SQL Database, I can only see whether the encryption is currently on or not, which is, if you don't want, you can switch it off anyways, but that is by default it is on, and it is highly recommended to keep it on. I'll have to go to server, logical server, to show you that this has been managed by service keys. So I'm on server end, getting into transparent data encryption. If you're able to see the screen, you can see that it is currently being service managed. But if you want to bring your own key, if you want to manage your own key, just click on customer managed key, and it says that, okay, change a key. I'll select that. I'll select my key vault. I've already created this morning. So I'll select a SQL Friday vault. And I don't have any keys at the moment, so I'll create a new one. Okay, if you want to generate a new key, you can generate a new key from here. But if you have a key in a file, you can import it from a file by selecting over here. If you have a key backup, you can restore it from the backup. Okay, I don't have any backups. I don't have any files. So I'm going to generate it in front of you. I'll give a good name, SQL Friday key, for example. and I'll keep RSA 2048-bit encryption in this. You can set an activation date if you want this key to get activated after a month or so, after 2 days, after a week, or whenever. You can always go and put a date time here. You can also put an expiration date if you want your key to. Sorry for that. If you want your key to expire within 6 months, 3 months, 2 months, 1 year, but depending upon your company's security policy, you can go and click this and you can put a date when this key gets expired. Anyways, I don't want to do that, and I want to enable it right now. As I create it, it gets enabled. So once this is done, key comes here and you can select the version of key, select it, save it. Now this is your key. Your TDE is being managed by your key, which you generated. Whenever you want to change, you can change the key. Whenever you want to expire, you can expire the key. You are no more using service managed key. This is your key. You can change the key from here. You can use HSM and all those things to get your keys. But this is how you will do it. Right. Getting back to my slide deck. And the last thing which I want to talk about is always encrypted, where encryption remains, where your data remains encrypted while in use. So whether it is in motion, whether it is at rest, your data remains always encrypted. Use this feature for extremely sensitive data. Okay. Now, how does this work? The data always gets encrypted and decrypted on the client end. So even a database administrator or sysadmin of your database or any most privileged user will not be able to see the data in plain text. It will always remain encrypted in your database. Because encryption and decryption happens on the client side, so only the data owner who owns the data will be able to see the data in plain text. Otherwise, no one will be able to see the data in plain text. Okay, and how does that work? When we actually go and configure always encrypted, there are two keys which gets generated. One is called CEK, another one is called CMK. CEK stands for column encryption key and CMK stands for column master key. So you use CEK to encrypt your column, and then CMK is used to encrypt your CEK. Encrypted CEK sits within the database and CMK sits within the Azure Key Vault or Windows Certificate Store, but in cloud, we would suggest you to go with Azure Key Vault. So Azure Key Vault holds CMK. CEK is within your Azure SQL DB, but it is encrypted. So unless you get a CMK, you can't decrypt CEK, and unless you decrypt CEK, you can't decrypt the column. So database engine doesn't have access to your plain text data unless the user have got access to Azure Key Vault. He has got no access to your encrypted data. Quickly, we'll see this is how it works. Quickly, we'll see the demo part of it. I'm going to encrypt a phone number from the customer table. So I'll get into the customer. I'll get into the columns and phone number, right click it, encrypt column. It is exactly same as you would do in your SQL Server, nothing different in Azure. You'll select phone number. You'll select how you can encrypt this particular column. There are two ways to do it, deterministic and randomized. While this encryption happens, I'll explain you what these are, but at the moment, let me just select one of those. It's okay. And this will, the encryption key used will be CEK_auto1. That's fine. I'll just leave it as it is. This will generate a column master key and it gets stored in either Windows Key Store or Azure Key Vault. I'll select Azure Key Vault. I've already created it for today. It needs some authentication. I'll just authenticate myself. Once it gets authentication, it comes back with my account and the key vault which I've created, SQL Friday Vault. So what is going to happen? Your CMK gets created and gets stored in Key Vault. Now there are two options here. Either you can generate a PowerShell and leave it for now and run this encryption sometimes when your database server is not in use, or you can always proceed it now. This is a very small database, a demo database. It will very, very quickly run this within 2 minutes or so. So I'll just proceed it now. I'll click next. So this is what this wizard is going to do. It's going to connect your SQL Friday database, create a CMK, store it into Key Vault, create a CEK, encrypt your customer phone number which sits within customer table using CEK, and the encryption type is deterministic. So I'll just click on finish, again authenticate to my Key Vault. Once done, this is happening. Okay, while it is happening, I'll quickly tell you the difference between the randomized deterministic encryption. Randomized encryption is more secure because it randomly generates completely different results every single time. So whenever encryption, decryption, and encryption happens, a different encrypted value comes up in randomized encryption. While in deterministic, it is always the same value which comes up. So deterministic encryption, which I'm currently doing, is slightly less secure. Randomized is more secure, but it all depends upon your need, because randomized encryption won't allow you to join your tables on this particular column, encrypted column. You can't group it. You can't index this column. If you want to index it, if you want to run queries on this particular column, it is better to go with the deterministic encryption. That is what it is. So this wizard has completed. I'll just run a query, and that is it. To show you, I'm running it on phone number in customer table, and you can see the first column, which is completely encrypted. So guys, that is it from me. Any questions, please go ahead and ask. I think we have got few moments. I'm absolutely sorry for today because of 5 minutes we lost, but happy to answer any of your questions.
No worries about the 5 minutes. It was super informational. I think although it's very simple to just go for create an Azure SQL database and start using it, these are the things people really should look at before just jumping into it. So very, very good information for anyone who is considering moving to Azure with their databases.
Any questions, please, or you can always connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a private message if you want. More than happy to answer you there as and when I can. But if there are no questions, then all good.
I have one actually.
Yeah, go on. Go on.
It's about key management. If I have a service managed key, and I create my database and I have my transparent data encryption going with the service managed key, and then I drop my Azure SQL database and remove the server and everything, but I have kept a backup of the database. Will that still be accessible, or will I run into a problem that when I drop the resource, the key is lost?
You have dropped the resource. You can't take a backup of Azure SQL DB, unfortunately. So,
true.
Answer you. This is Azure SQL DB is a PaaS service. We take backup within a schedule. So we have a full backup. We have daily backups, and we have like transaction log backups every 3 to 5 minutes. You can do a point-in-time recovery for all those backups. If you guys are interested, I can show you how Azure SQL DB works in a different session where we can talk about all those things. But you can recover your backup, which is already there, but you can't take your own backup. Okay. So until the service is on and the backups are there, your key is okay. But once you drop everything, your resource group and everything, your backup is gone and everything is gone. It's gone. So you can't take backup, so you can't revert it from your backup.
Okay.
This is slightly different for SQL managed instance, but I'll not go into that. SQL managed instance, you can take a backup of your own and you can store it. That's a different story altogether. But anyways, because of the session was an Azure SQL DB, let's not get there, because that will open up a lot of other things.
That's another hour.
That's another hour, but yes.
So I don't see any questions in the chat, and I don't see anyone who unmuted themselves. So with that, I think all that's left to do is to thank you so much for coming to SQL Friday. It was a really good session. I see the comments in the chat are great session, lovely session, and I agree with all of them. So very good job, Manish.
Thanks a lot, man. Thank you. And thanks for letting me to your wonderful SQL Friday event. More than happy. Whenever you need me, just ping me. You have my address, and I'm more than happy to come back whenever.
Thank you.
Okay, man. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.